There's one thing everyone fears: the silence of the late night. When the world is asleep and all that remains is the sound of the wind and your own heartbeat. But for some people, that night wasn't just silence. It was the beginning of a real nightmare. These are true horror stories about people who were completely alone at night. Each story unfolds under the weight of darkness when there's no one left to call for help. Brace yourself, because sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost, but the human standing just outside your door. I've always enjoyed peaceful and quiet late-night walks. There's something about the deep, rural stillness that makes everything feel simpler. I'm a welder by trade, been doing it for over 40 years now. I live alone on a big farm, just me and my dog Bosley. The house is too large for one person, but I never had the heart to downsize after my wife Maria passed away. My kids moved out years ago, and ever since cancer took her, it's just been me and Bosley. One night, after a long day in the shop, I decided to go for a walk. My property is pretty big, so just a single loop is usually enough to satisfy my craving. Enough to satisfy my craving for calm. After a long day, the air was cool and Bosley trotted along beside me, his paws softly tapping the dirt path. Sometimes I think he likes me more than I like him. I've walked that loop hundreds of times, but as I was heading back toward the house, a sudden unease crept into the silence. Something caught my eye. I glanced up at the second-story window, the one that looks out from the bedroom Maria and I used to share. For a split second, a faint shadow seemed to pass behind the curtain, and I thought I saw something move. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in the cold, still air, staring up at that window. There was no reason anyone should be in there. I hadn't been in that room in years, couldn't bring myself to. I felt my blood start to boil at the thought of some stranger, possibly lurking inside my peaceful farmhouse, breaking into my house. I wasn't going to stand for that. I rushed inside my flashlight, shaking in my trembling hand, my heart racing, and ran upstairs. The room was empty, just like I'd left it, silent, dusty, and cold as ever. No sign of anything out of place. I looked everywhere imaginable, but found nothing. Yes, I was pretty freaked out, but I was more angry than anything. I didn't take this kind of thing lightly. I figured I had just seen something that wasn't there. I stood there for a while, feeling foolish, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had truly been standing there moments before. Something had been there the next night. I woke up to Bosley growling under the faint yellow light of midnight. He's a good dog, never barks unless there's something to bark at. I sat up in my bed, listening as silence wrapped a whole farmhouse tightly. That's when I heard creaking coming from upstairs. It could have just been the sounds of my old house, but every echo crawled down my spine like ice. My mind went directly to footsteps which were coming from right. Above me, I'm sure you could guess. Which room is directly above mine? I debated grabbing my hunting rifle from downstairs, but fear and disbelief froze me completely. Didn't want to go that far. If it came down to it, I was still trying to stay calm and confident that I could take whatever was up there hand to hand. I grabbed my old metal flashlight and went to check again. Nothing. The room was exactly the same, untouched and cold as a tomb. My anger was definitely starting to turn into rising waves of anxiety at this point. Something didn't feel right in the house. The following night, I came downstairs to find the kitchen lights on. I know I turned them off before bed. I don't leave lights on. There was no question anymore. Someone was already inside my home. I started to panic. I called the police and told them I thought someone might be moving through my house unseen. Sneaking around, they came out, searched the house from top to bottom, but found nothing. They were nice about it, told me to call again if I needed them, but I could tell they didn't believe me. That quiet disbelief made me feel more alone than ever before. The next night was the worst by far. I couldn't sleep, so I decided to go upstairs and check the bedroom again. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would settle my mind, but when I opened the door, I froze. There were clothes scattered across the floor like a cruel echo of the past. Maria's clothes, I had packed them away after she died. Now they were everywhere. Something so deeply wrong filled the room like grief made visible. Like this doesn't just happen randomly. And then I saw her. There was a woman standing in the doorway, just staring at me. I couldn't see her face clearly, but I could tell she wasn't Maria. She was too short. I don't know who she was, but she didn't belong there. I had never been so afraid in my life without thinking. I ran at her, she turned and bolted down the stairs and out the front door. By the time I got outside, she was gone. I searched the property with my terrified dog Bosley under the cold moonlight, but there was no trace of her. I didn't sleep that night. For months after that window, it was her again. My heart felt like it stopped as the freezing night wind hit my face. I grabbed my hunting rifle and ran outside Bosley, close behind. She was still there, a motionless silhouette standing under the pale moonlight watching me. I fired a few warning shots into the air, hoping to scare her off. That was enough to get her to turn and run into the darkness, but it's not like that made me feel any better. I was literally being tormented by some random woman who was probably homeless. The thought that she might return again made my hands tremble. I couldn't even imagine why this was happening to me. I stood there for a long time, waiting to see if she'd come back. She never did. I haven't seen her since, but I know it's only a matter of time. I'm haunted every single night, fully prepared to defend myself, but I don't think living in constant suffocating fear like this is sustainable. Thank God for Bosley, my one anchor to reality. I have no idea what I'd do without him. In this quiet farm of shadows, I'll send an update if anything happens. The hours completely drain every ounce of energy, and it's not at all what I thought I'd be doing with my life. By the time I get home, I'm either so wired from caffeine that I can't sleep, or I pass out the second I hit the bed and stay that way for 12 long, restless hours. I was driving back home one night at like 2 in the quiet morning. It was nice to be driving my own car again. As I was approaching my house, I realized I had probably had one too many Red Bulls, and there was no way I'd be able to sleep. On top of that, I hadn't eaten in hours, and I was starving. There's a McDonald's right off the highway, about 10 short minutes from my house. About 10 minutes from my house, it's usually my first choice when it comes to late night snacks, since it's just so convenient. I'm not even one to gorge myself on fast food. I just occasionally get this strange, irresistible craving that only a handful of fries can satisfy. It's obviously open 24/7, and I figured some comfort food would be the perfect thing to help me finally unwind after a long shift. I don't remember exactly what time it was, but it was definitely well past 2 in the morning by the time I pulled into the drive-thru. There were a few cars ahead of me, which I was actually kind of surprised by. Something about that moment felt strangely off. Like this, McDonald's was a busy spot at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. As I was sitting there impatiently, I found myself staring off into space, feeling the heavy stillness of the empty night and wondering what was taking so long. That's when I noticed something strange. There was an old, beat-up Volkswagen with its windows tinted, parked in an unnervingly quiet corner of the lot. The McDonald's itself was only accepting drive-thru orders at this hour, so there was absolutely no reason for any car to be sitting there motionless. There were reserved spots on the other side for employees, clearly marked with bright yellow signs, so it couldn't have been one of them. I figured it was maybe just someone eating quietly in their car, which it probably was. I, myself, did that from time to time, so I guess I couldn't judge. It was just an odd and strangely unsettling sight, to be completely honest. I got my food and started driving away. I didn't want to go home just yet, but I also didn't want to just sit there idling my car. I began racking my brain, trying to think of a good place to scarf down the food. I live in a pretty lush area, so there's honestly a lot of options, but I didn't want to beat around the bush too much considering how late it was. There's a massive darkened nature preserve literally down the street from my house. It's situated on a mountain and is essentially just an enormous forest stretching endlessly beneath the night sky. The kicker is that there's a scenic lookout point at the peak with a view of the city, a place both peaceful and hauntingly silent. There's a road that loops around the perimeter of the preserve and will take you right to the peak, winding quietly through the mountain air, which is nice during the day. After the preserve closes, though, the road is inaccessible to cars, but still a convenient path to get to the peak without having to walk through any deep woods. With my friends from high school all the time, it was kind of a default spot when we wanted to be outside. We'd hang out, talk, smoke, or just appreciate the view under the cool, quiet, and star-filled night sky. I actually hadn't been there in a while because I was just so busy working all the time, so I figured going there would deliver a much-needed nostalgic and peaceful rush of memory. When I got to the preserve parking area, it was completely empty, eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you tense. I say parking area because it wasn't a traditional parking lot with spaces for cars, but rather a big patch of gravel that veered off from one of the roads that ran past. The preserve's border, like I said, the actual preserve was closed, meaning I'd have to walk all the way up to the lookout spot from outside. Before I could even turn off the engine, my pulse quickened sharply. I saw headlights pulling into the lot that was unsettling enough on its own. The entire forest felt colder, heavier, almost holding its breath. Who else would be here at 2 a.m.? And then I realized what I was looking at, that same old beat-up Volkswagen from the McDonald's parking lot, unmistakably familiar in the dark. I was 100% certain of it. The odds chilled me to the bone. I parked a little ways away, and the engine cut off. I felt the unease start to pour in. It crawled up my spine, whispering danger in the still night. What were the odds of that happening? Naturally, had they followed me, my window was partially rolled down, and as far as I could tell, there was no music coming from that car, or at least, none that I could hear. After nothing happened for a good minute or so, my heartbeat began to slow down slightly, and my fear started to fade. They were probably doing the same thing I was, out for some fresh air and quiet reflection beneath the stars, or maybe a smoke. It's a pretty popular spot for that kind of thing, but I was just so weirded out considering how late it was. Even in that silence, my instincts whispered something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, even though I concluded that it was just one of those unexplainable coincidences. Unexplainable coincidences made my chest tighten with uneasy late-night fear and confusion. I sat there for a minute debating if I should just go home. I didn't want to leave, but the eerie silence made it worse. I didn't want to be alone either. I picked up my phone and FaceTimed one of my close friends who lived a few minutes away. I told myself that if he didn't pick up, I'd just finish my meal nervously in the car and drive home. He was actually awake though, which I was a little surprised by. He said he had been up writing a paper. Relieved, but still tense, I convinced him to swing by and hang out for a bit. He was down, he said he'd be there in... While I waited, I kept my eyes on the Volkswagen. It still hadn't moved, and the silence around me felt unnaturally heavy, pressing against my chest. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. When Sebastian finally pulled into the lot, I felt a lot better. We both got out of our cars and began walking up the path. Before the parking lot fully receded from view, I shot a glance backward. The Volkswagen was still there, but I saw all 4 doors open at once. 4 guys stepped out. They just stood there for a few seconds, looking at each other. They weren't even talking, just frozen in that strange, wordless tension, looking around at each other. It was freaky. I nudged SA, who realized what I was looking at before they could see us. We continued walking up the path so that the lot was obstructed from view. as my heart pounded faster with every step. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but Sebastian didn't seem that concerned, trying to laugh it off nervously, like nothing was wrong. He told me they were probably just going out to smoke. We kept walking, and by the time we got to the top, the cold night air wrapped around us in uneasy silence. The city view was enough to take my mind off things. For a brief, deceptive moment of calm, we always sat on this little rock wall that was supposed to keep people from wandering off the edge of the mountain, as if that thin wall could guard us from what followed. We were sitting there eating and talking like we used to, feeling almost peaceful under the cold night sky. It was nice for a few moments, a rare sense of calm in the middle of the darkness. Of course, that fragile peace didn't last long. We soon heard the sound of talking and laughter quickly approaching us. Turning around, we saw three guys walking toward us, their voices echoing strangely through the quiet forest. They were sharing what looked like a blunt and acting friendly enough, which definitely calmed my nerves a little, but the way they stared felt deliberate, unsettlingly close. Instead of finding their own spot, they walked right up to us like they wanted to start a conversation. The guy with the blunt was covered in tattoos and had a nose ring. He honestly looked pretty intimidating, standing under the dim moonlight. He flashed half a smile before asking us if we wanted to smoke. We both said no, and one of the other guys laughed and called us names, to which Sebastian scoffed. My curiosity suddenly overwhelmed my fear and caution, and I nervously, but recklessly, blurted out a question about what they were doing at McDonald's. The guy holding the blunt dropped his smile instantly and narrowed his eyes like a predator, sensing hidden prey, caught off guard by my question. His two friends did the same, their faces turning stiff and emotionless, staring at us with cold, unreadable, almost lifeless expressions. They didn't say anything for an uncomfortably long time, and in that silence, I realized with growing dread and disbelief how fast everything had changed. There had been 4 guys in that car, not 3. One of them was missing, and that realization hit me like a sudden cold wave of dread. At that point, I was fully prepared to run. I knew Sebastian was thinking the same thing. Finally, the ringleader told us that he worked nights and that he had just gotten off. He pulled his hoodie up to reveal a McDonald's uniform, his smirk faintly glowing under the dim park light. I think because he knew we wouldn't have believed him otherwise. He then went on to say he came to the spot every day after work to smoke with his friends. While that definitely calmed me down a bit, a strange unease kept tightening around my chest. Something about this situation was off deeply, unshakably off. Terribly off, I could tell. Sebastian felt the same. We decided it was time to go. As we started walking down the lonely forest path, Sebastian suddenly stopped and pointed into the trees. I followed his gaze and saw the 4th guy half hidden in the darkness holding something I couldn't quite see. My heart began to pound faster, realizing this wasn't just a coincidence anymore. The moment he saw us looking, he started moving slow at first, then faster. That's when we ran full speed into the cold night, glancing back to see him chasing us, the 3 other guys crashing through the trees behind him. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might explode every step, echoing the terror closing in. Would burst. I could hear their footsteps getting closer, but I didn't look back again as the cold night air cut through my fear. We finally made it to the parking lot, jumped into our cars, and sped off in absolute panic as I was speeding. Away, I could see those guys rushing to get in their car, their shadows stretching under the dim lights. I didn't feel comfortable driving home out of fear that I'd be leading them right to my house. The thought alone made my hands shake. I called Sebastian and told him we should meet back up on his street, my voice trembling, but determined we had a decent head start on them, and I don't think we were followed. But I wasn't taking any chances because safety still felt impossibly far away. We were still in shock about the terrifying encounter from last night, not knowing if those guys were trying to rob us or do something even worse. I didn't know what to think. Every thought raced through my mind like thunder. Sebastian showed me his phone and said he had secretly taken a picture of them while they weren't looking. He sent it to me, but I wasn't sure what to even do with it. I had the next day off, so I convinced Sebastian to come with me back to that same McDonald's where everything started so we could at least report the employee. The next day, we approached a guy on the younger side who seemed trustworthy, hoping he'd listen to us. We showed him the picture and told him what happened. To him what happened, and his eyes widened in total disbelief and fear. He told us something literally out of a horror movie. Apparently, that guy's girlfriend had also worked at that same McDonald's and had dumped him a few months ago. After countless disturbing arguments, he didn't take it well and would harass her while she was working and stalk her after her shifts. He obviously got fired, but that didn't help. The police were involved shortly after, and there was a restraining order put in place. Apparently, he had been violating that restraining order for weeks without anyone noticing because he was camping out in the parking lot. Sebastian, my friend, and I were horrified that night. I have no idea why he decided to follow me, but it was clear that he was unhinged. I'm praying that the police finally catch him soon camping out in the parking lot, because then he'll actually be screwed. I just hope he doesn't recognize my car anywhere. It's only been a week, yet fear still controls my thoughts, but I haven't been back to that McDonald's or the preserve since. Hopefully the police are able to do something, though deep down I know they probably won't, but that's out of my control. Pennsylvania, not much goes on around here, so finding things to do can be a challenge. In high school, a few friends and I would sneak into and explore old, decaying, and eerily abandoned buildings. That's the sort of thing we did at that age. I didn't realize how popular that kind of stuff is until many years later. Apparently, lots of people like to explore dark, forgotten ruins. Anyway, there was this chilling abandoned church that we'd been to a couple of times before. It was in Narberth. I actually remember the exact address, 198 Elmwood Avenue, still burned in my mind forever. The place was creepy, but it was kind of our go-to spot for late-night thrills. When boredom and curiosity pushed us again, one fall evening, a few of us decided to hit the church and drink a little inside. It was a chilly night, and the air had that crisp bite to it, like the cold carried whispers of the past. There were 6 of us: me, Luna, Gina, Johnny, Max, and Ally. The church sat behind an 8-foot rusted chain link fence under the dim moonlight, which we had to climb to get in the fast. Doors were all boarded up, so we always went through a window on the side. The sound of breaking silence echoed softly. Once you were inside, the first thing you noticed was the floor, or lack of one. It looked like a hollow shell of forgotten faith. The entire first floor was just dirt. It looked disturbingly like someone had ripped out the floorboards years ago, leaving only a huge, gaping hole in the center, where a set of concrete stairs descended into the cold, silent basement. That's where we always ended up down in. The basement. The basement had 3 rooms, but only one had a door. The other 2 just had door frames. The first room we went into was the largest and eeriest one. There wasn't much in it, just some old forgotten furniture, broken chairs, a busted couch. I remember having to shush Johnny like 12 different times because he was a lightweight and the tiny bit of alcohol he had was already making him ridiculously loud. Making him really loud and antsy. Being in such a big group was always a plus though, and I felt much safer knowing we had numbers. We messed around for a while, drinking and laughing like we usually did. Maybe even had a speaker playing some faint music in the dusty air, but I don't fully remember. Out of nowhere, a thunderous door slam echoed through the basement, and I literally jumped. That's how loud it was. We froze, staring at each other with concerned expressions. At first, I thought one of us had closed the door by accident, but no one had moved a single inch. Almost immediately, Luna, Gina, and Johnny sprinted in total panic toward the stairs, sprinting up the stairs, leaving me, Max, and Ally behind the echo of their footsteps. Fading fast into the dark, we were the fearless ones, and none of us wanted to leave just yet. My heart was definitely pounding. I fully admit that, but I wasn't gonna let the wind freak me out. I could tell Max and Allie were thinking the same thing. I don't know if it was curiosity or stupidity, but we decided to investigate. The hallway felt heavier than before, the silence almost breathing. After standing in silence for a few minutes, the three of us crept over to open the door that had slammed shut. Behind it waited something we never expected to see. It was a small room, and the first thing I saw was a dresser, its mirror faintly catching our flashlight glow. Top of it was cracked, and there were red stains smeared across the surface. At first I thought it was old paint or something, but when I got closer, I realized something terrifying. It wasn't completely dry. The stains still had that sticky, almost glistening sheen, like whatever it was hadn't been there for long. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up, and I was having deep second thoughts about staying. Someone, or dare I say something unseen, had recently been in this room. Then I saw the picture. There was an old photo on top of the dresser, a black and white image of a woman in a wedding dress, smiling faintly in the dim light. A white shot of a woman in a wedding dress. She was smiling, but there was something off about it, an eerie, unnatural smile that chilled me. The whole thing gave me a bad feeling. I backed away, but just as I turned, we heard another noise. This time, it wasn't the door. It was coming from one of the other rooms, a low, heavy shuffle echoing in the dark. It was coming from the room we had just been in. That's when Max and Allie both decided they'd had enough. I wasn't going to argue with them. Terror had already taken over our senses. We grabbed our stuff and ran out of there as fast as we could. When we climbed back over the fence and hit the pavement, none of us said a word after just the sound of our breaths trembling in the night. Jumping the fence, I turned around and I could swear I saw the silhouette of a motionless figure, eerily illuminated by moonlight, standing in the open window. I still pray that by some minuscule chance, my mind was just playing tricks on me. But I'll never know for sure. My friends and I never went back there together for as long as we remained friends. I've actually been back to that church myself, although it wasn't a church anymore. By the time I got around to checking it out again, it was completely demolished. I still have no idea what we saw that night. I'm just thankful it never followed me home. I'm still profoundly glad my friends were there to witness it with me. Had I been alone, I might truly have doubted this whole thing even happened. If anyone wants to do some digging, go ahead. I was never able to find out anything online, but I wouldn't be surprised if that old eerie church has a history I don't know about. Thank you for watching and supporting the channel. If you'd like to share your own story to be featured in an upcoming video, please email me at nighthorrorstoriesus@gmail.com. Every story has the power to touch someone's heart. And who knows, maybe your story will be the next one told. Send it in today, and let's share unforgettable moments together.